Hello! If you'd like to get a handy sewing or quilting measuring gauge but don't want to necessarily spend money on it, I'll show you today 2 simple ways to make one out of materials you already have at home. This tool is useful for quickly measuring and marking where you need to cut or sew, for buttonholes and for marking sewing allowances, usually 1 or 1.5 centimeters for a seam and 4 centimeters for a hem, but I also put a half centimeter and 3 centimeters markings on my gauge. To make this, you will need a ruler, scissors or a sharp scalpel, a pen, paper scraps, post-its, or the best option is graph paper. We'll be using these for the template. And as for the material of the gauge, it can be plastic from containers you find around the house, cardstock for crafting, from cereal boxes or packaging. You'll need a cutting surface, such as glass or a cutting mat if you're using a scalpel, and some double-sided adhesive or a glue stick or just any temporary glue. The easiest way to make a gauge that suits your needs is by using graph paper. 2 squares equal 1 centimeter. 1 square is then of course half a centimeter. That makes it easy to make a template. You don't need a ruler, just count the squares as you go. The layout of this gauge is my favorite one, and I'll show you some other ones I've come up with later. I started by drawing 1.5 centimeters, which is useful for marking seam allowances. Then I drew a 4 centimeter line for the hem allowance, but I also put a mark for 3 centimeters, which may be useful to measure the finished hem. The bottom measures 2 centimeters, the side measures 1. And finally I made a half a centimeter mark, which comes in handy when sewing with a double needle, for example, or for folding the fabric. Whatever measurements you choose, make sure to draw them like this so they stick out from the rest. Rulers have a lot of markings and they are completely flat, so it's sometimes hard to see and find the right measurement when you put the ruler on a fabric. With the gauge, you place it on the fabric and immediately see if the seam allowance, for example, matches the 1.5 centimeter mark or not. It's much quicker and doesn't exhaust your eyes. You don't have to look for any markings on a ruler. You see if it fits or not immediately. If you don't have any graph paper, use any paper scraps. Post-its are useful because they already have straight edges. I drew parallel lines to make my own kind of grid, but you'll need to measure everything with a ruler. That's why I prefer to use graph paper. On this gauge, the part that sticks out measures 1 centimeter. I put a tick on it, just so that I know I need that part once I start cutting out the template. The bottom measures 1.5 centimeters, the side is 2, and the top is a half centimeter. I marked what parts I need to cut out, and you can use a scalpel, but scissors are fine as well. It's useful to always mark your measurements. These templates can be used over and over again to make as many gauges as you need. They're small and fit everywhere. You can piece a hole through if you need it. And here are the 2 designs or layouts that I showed on the video, and the third one is very similar. I'll put a photo at the end of the video so you can pause and see the details if you want. I traced the pattern on a piece of cardstock. Again, you can use plastic from empty containers or broken things. After tracing, I decided to cut it out with a surgical scalpel. Surgical because those are very sharp, and if you don't have one, use a regular scalpel or scissors. Even a craft knife works. I cleaned up the edges a bit and wrote down all the measurements. The 4 centimeters mark can be on the top or at the bottom. It really doesn't matter. As I already said, this gauge can be quite helpful. For example, I use sewing patterns that don't have seam allowances included, so I can just take the gauge and a pen, and it doesn't take long to mark all those allowances at all on all the pattern pieces. Rulers are too long and just get in the way of doing it. If you'd like to see and copy my layouts, make sure to pause at the end of the video, and to find out when a new sewing or embroidery video is uploaded, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy sewing!